Hello and welcome to Casio 5, another tutorial on the Casio WK7600, which I'm working on today. And also this tutorial is good for the Casio CTK7200. Same keyboard, just not as many keys. So we just saw a performance of varying styles and varying rhythms throughout that performance. So up until now we've been using the style portion of this Casio in a very, very simple way. We've been choosing styles, and we've been just using these controls here to change the way the styles react to our music. But for anybody that watched that video very carefully, they will know I was doing something very different. And what I was doing very different was I was switching banks and registration. Well, I'm on the same bank. I'm switching registration as I played. And that is something that really adds to the performance of this keyboard. You're not limited to the 6 parts of the rhythm. There are 6 parts of the rhythm. You have the intro, you have the normal fill-in, you have the variation fill-in, and the ending. 6 parts to every style. But by using the registration, you can go in rhythm, in time, between registrations and change more rhythms. So in the presentation I did at the beginning, the performance, I started with a normal factory preset rhythm, and then I edited that rhythm and I put that rhythm into registration 5, and I switched back and forth between 6 and 5, which gave me, instead of 6 options, it gave me 12 options for rhythm. And that's with start and endings. If you forget about the start and endings, we have 1 normal, 1 variation, and as I switch to the next bank, I have another normal and another variation for 4 completely different ones. So what I did is I took the factory preset and I edited it down into something simpler. I took the drums out of it and made it very simple, so I could start as a simple one and then build up to a more complex rhythm by going from the registration 5, where it was stored as a simpler version, to registration 6. And that's what gave that performance and there's actually more I could do in that performance. I didn't use too many of the fill-ins. I used some of the fill-ins, but not all of them. I could have used more fill-ins and even made it more lifelike, more lively. So let's at least start off with the setup I made. And I used a tone. My starting tone was in the H category, or the synth category. It was 133, the steel pad, and that was a factory preset. I didn't do anything to it. I then picked for my rhythm out of A003 synth pop 2. Then I added a layer. The layer is from the synth category again, 135, brightness 1. And then I did not use a split this time, but I did use the arpeggiator, which you heard a lot of. And the arpeggiation is number 48, add 5 UD. So that was number 48. And the rest of it was just the normal switching that we normally do, except for switching to banks. So let me show you. First we have there was the layer. Here's the single layer. Here's the arpeggiator. And then our basic rhythm is a factory preset. There's the normal for the fill-in. Now I'm going to go to the variation. switch registration numbers here. There's the edited, that's the edited version that I did right there of the same style. And here's the edited fill-in. And here's the edited variation. And I also did an edited intro and an edited ending on this one too. That's the intro. And here's the ending. So I used the mixer function and edited this this style, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to set the Casio up in exactly the same way that I did that performance, and we're going to go through and we're going to edit the factory preset, rhythm A003 synth pop 2. And this is only one of 3 ways or 4 ways that you can edit styles. So I'm going to start with the simplest way and show you that today. It's a whole nother tutorial to actually record these styles from scratch, or to erase certain tracks and re-record those tracks. It gets very, very deep. So we're going to stay simple today, because this type of editing will get you through probably the next year of experimenting with this keyboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the camera and I'm going to focus in on the display again, because it's all about the display setting this up. And again, don't watch this tutorial if you haven't seen the first 4, because you're going to get lost. So today the controls we're going to be using are the navigation controls, the edit, the enter, the arrow buttons. We're going to be using the function yes and no buttons. We're going to be using registration banks and registration. We're going to be using the rhythm buttons, and then all of the rhythm controls. I've gone over all the controls before, so you already know what I'm going to be talking about. I will be mentioning what buttons I'm hitting as I'm focused in on this display, but that's about it. I'm going to focus in on the display and then going to get started setting this Casio up to make that performance like you saw at the beginning of this video. And here we go. We're all focused in on the display. And the first thing you'll see at the top is we have a tone H, which is our synth category, H133 steel pad. That is a factory preset tone. I'm using factory preset tones today, so I don't do too much confusing as we go into editing the factory styles. Now when I push the layer button, you're going to see the layered version, and that is again the synth category H135 brightness 1. So if you pick those 2, you're going to match what I got, and that's what you probably want to do with this tutorial, is match what I got. And so as you can see, the layers on, layers off. Arpeggiator, holding down the arpeggiator button until the display changes, and there you can see the 048 add 5 UD. That is the the arpeggiator. And the first tone is the steel pad. Layered tone, steel pad plus brightness. Well, what's given that second tone, all that extra punch, is I took the brightness 2 layer and I lowered it 2 octaves. So let's hold down the layer button until it's hit. Octave shift 0. That's the first layer, and we're going to go to upper octave shift upper 1 is +1. Upper 2 is +2. So we have the no octave change on upper 1, the first layer. We have a -2 octave change on upper 2, and that's what gave it all the big thump, is lowering that octave. And there was no split today. We're not setting up a split. So the basic setups today are we're using a steel pad as layer 1, a brightness 1 as layer 2, and the arpeggiator. And that's about it for the tones. Now with the rhythm, this is the Synth Pop 2. This is the factory preset. That is a factory preset, A003 Synth Pop 2. So you can set that in there and be all set up. Now once you have these set in here, now we have to save the bank. Because we're making all these settings, we have to save a bank, otherwise we're going to lose them all whenever you change banks or you turn the machine off. So I'm going to do a store on my chosen bank. As you can see, it said 16.6. That means I was on bank 16, registration 6. I'll do that again. I'm holding down the store button next to the bank numbers on the far right. I'm holding that down and pressing 6. And it's storing, it's doing it really fast. Doesn't take long to store all these settings. And it's storing this on 16, bank 16, registration 6. So now everything's been saved, and at any time that I hit the button, I'll go to bank 16.1. This is a completely different setup. When I go back to 6, everything should be here. And it is. It's all saved. Okay, so that's our basic setup now. Our tone, our layers, and everything. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to copy that to another bank. And for please put this bank right next to it so you don't forget where it's at. So I'm now stored on this 16.6. Bank 16, registration 6. Now I'm going to, with this loaded in the machine, I'm going to hold down the store button, and I'm going to store that on 16.5. Now, bank 16.5 and bank 16, bank 16.5 and bank 16 registration 6 are exactly the same. They're exactly the same now. And what I'm going to do is turn off that layer, because I didn't want that layer saved as a on there. So I'm going to turn that off. We're going to go through this again. I'm turning the layer off. You can see the layer button go off. And I'm going to resave my original one, 16.6. And now I'm going to copy that to 5 by just saving it again and going to 5. Now those two are identical again. So we have a factory preset on our factory preset rhythm on 5, and that's, we're going to edit it. We're going to edit this on bank 5. So here we go. This will be our first editing. So what I'm doing is I'm going to the pattern sequencer. This button right underneath the display, it says pattern rhythm. Actually, it says pattern sequencer. I'm going to push that button once. Display will say pattern sequence, and it says fixed data because this is just one level of editing these styles. Like I said, it goes very, very deep. Now, next I'm going to hit the mixer button once, and that sets me up into the mixer. Now, all this time, through all the tutorials, I've been telling you that we set up the mixer values for 1, 2, 3, and 4. Layer 1, layer 2, split, and arpeggio. These are channels 1, 2, 3, 4. So channel 1 is layer 1, channel 2 is layer 2, channel 3 is split, channel 4 is arpeggiator or harmonizer. And I've been telling you that you could adjust the rhythms, and the rhythm section is channels 9 through 16. I've been saying along, you can adjust that, but you just couldn't save it. And this is the only way we can save it. We're going to make our own rhythm, and then we're going to save our rhythm in our own user rhythm storage area, and that is the F area. And we'll be going through, as soon as we make a few edits, I'm going to store it. So now we've pressed the pattern sequencer and we've pressed mixer, and now we're in the mixer pattern sequencer level of the menu. Now I'm going to the navigation controls now, and I'm going to use the down arrow to start going through. I'm using the down arrow to go through the mixer settings I have for the rhythm here. So this is the point where you can follow it's the heavy bullet and the heavy parentheses that indicates the parameter we can adjust. And we use the navigation arrows next to the exit and enter to do that. Now, we've been through all that before. I'm not going to go through it now. Now, the part is going to, we never use the on-off that much, but during this rhythm section, we can actually turn on and off parts of the rhythm section. So let's start our rhythm, and so I'm going to use the start stop on the rhythm button. And now you can see all the indicators are going. Now what I have to do is I have to make sure that I'm on, after I start it, I have to make sure that I'm on the correct normal fill, variation fill, one of the 6. You got intro 1, you got normal 2, normal fill-in 3, variation 4, variation fill-in 5, and ending as the 6 completely different ways you can edit any one of those 6. So we're going to start with the intro. So I'm going to start stop. Now I'm going to hit the intro button. There's the intro, and you can see it's repeating. It's going to just keep repeating while we edit. Now if you notice now be careful, because as I use my navigation arrow, see the little triangle under the 10 there? You can see it moving. I have to use my navigation arrows to edit each individual channel. So channel 10 is my drums, channel 9 is percussion, and channel 11 through 16 can be anything. Any sound you want to put in there. So let's start the rhythm. And you can see by the blinking light, we're editing the intro. You can see intro repeating over and over again, and it's blinking. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to stay on my part, and it says on off. I'm going to use the yes no buttons, and I'm going to turn this off with the no button. So you can see I just turned off the drums. Now while this is running, I'm going to go ahead and switch to normal. Now we're editing the normal, and I'm going to turn off those drums. Now those drums are turned off. Now without stopping, I'm going to go to variation. And I'm going to turn those drums off. And then I'm going to go to the ending. You can see each one comes on because editing these are completely different. So I'm going to turn the ending drums off. Okay. So now I'm going back to normal. And now I'm going to edit some of these other tones. So as I move my right arrow, we're going to see, well, what's actually playing on 11? Well, let's turn it off and see what happens. That's the bass. So I'm going to leave the bass in there. I'm going to take my navigation arrows and move over to this channel 13. Turn that off. It's one of those beats. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave everything else on. And now I'm going to further edit channel 11, which is the bass, by going down to my volume and turning that up. So I just turned up the bass. And that's as far as I'm going to edit the normal. Now the variation, I'm going to edit that to make it a very kind of a sweet sound. So let's continue editing. I'm going to turn it back on, switch to the variation. And now I'm going to take make sure you watch the little triangle underneath the channel number so you know where I'm at. I'm going to turn 13 off. I'm going to scroll over to 14 with my arrows. I'm going to turn that one off. I'm going to turn 15 off. And I'm going to turn 16 off. And I'm going to turn 16 back on. And now we've pretty much changed that rhythm. We've taken out the big thumping out of it, we've taken the drums out of it, and we've left kind of a nice little tone in there. So we've already edited quite a bit. So what I'm going to do is hit my exit button. I'm going to hit that button once and be careful and watch the display and watch what happens here. I go back to my fixed data, so I'm not up to the upper level yet. So I'm going to hit the exit button a second time. And now it's asking me what do I want to store, because I've been editing this rhythm. And you have to be very careful and not go through this very fast, or you're going to end up storing it in the wrong place or not storing it at all. So I go to my yes no buttons and I say yes, I do want to store this. And by default it's going to come up with 001, and that is in our rhythm section we have 6 buttons, and that's A, B, C, D, E, and F is user rhythms. And that's what this one is. This is 001 user rhythm. Now if you haven't never stored anything, then 001 is a good place to store it. But I would never store it in 001, because by default it's always going to be this number. So if you accidentally store something, you're going to overwrite whatever you have in 001. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up to 010, and that's where I want to store it. Now I'm going to push my enter button just like it's asking me. And I have something there, but I know I'm going to replace it because this is the 10 that I used originally. And I'm going to push my yes button, and that's going to overwrite F010 of my user rhythms. It's now complete, and we're at the top level of the menu. Except now we have a stored F010 as our rhythm. So even though I didn't change the name, I have the option of changing the name, but I didn't. Synth Pop 2 is the factory preset, but we edited it. So the only way to save an edited style is in the user rhythms. That's the F category of your rhythms. And so it's F010 right where I stored it. Now, I need to save my registration. Now, here's where you can really screw up. You have to remember where your original was and where you copied it to. So in my case, my original was bank 16, registration 6. And my copy, the one I want to edit, is 5. So there I'm going, stirring. You saw it real fast. Bank, I'll do that again. Holding down the store button, pressing 5. Bank 16, registration 5 is now stored with my user. So if I start the rhythm, now when I start the rhythm, because we took the drum track out, you can't hear anything until I play a chord. So there's the chord of the normal, and there is the variation. Now when I switch banks, it's going to go back to the factory. I switch banks on the fly. There I just switched back to our 16.5, I edited one. So we edited the intro, the ending, the normal, then the variation and the ending. So there we have the edited and saved in our user rhythms and saved in our banks. And that is how I set up this keyboard at the beginning for the performance. So now, as I turn on the rhythm and play a chord, there's my edited rhythm. Now I'm going to put in a fill, switch over to variation. There's my variation. Now I can go back to normal and switch to bank 6. And now the drums come in and I can switch to variation. So there you can see we have our edited rhythm. I had my edited rhythm on 5 and I had my factory preset on 6. So now instead of 2 main style themes, normal and variation, I have 4 because I stored an identical version on 5 and then we edited 5 down. And that is the way to make this keyboard really sing. I mean, we have available right in front of us 6 registrations per bank. So that means you can have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 different variations of a rhythm for one song and easily switch between all of them. So you can see you can make a very, very complex rhythm starting from very, very simple to very, very complex. As many banks and registrations as you want to use within one song. And I hope that's not too confusing, so let's do a little recap and a little summary. I'm going to go through what we did one step at a time again from the very beginning. Very beginning we chose our steel pad, which was the synth category H133. That was our first step. Step 2, we added a layer, brightness 1, and that's synth layer H135. We picked out a factory preset of A003 synth pop 2. Then we added an arpeggiator, 048 add 5 UD, and then we began to edit. And the way into the edit again, first we took this and then we saved it as a registration, and I saved it as 16.6. Then we copied it by having this already stored on the keyboard and pressing store and 5, and I've copied it to 5. And when I copied it, what I just copied to 5 now was 6. So all that editing I just did on the rhythm is not in 5 anymore. You might say, oh no, we lost it all. You go, no, you didn't. All you lost was this rhythm setting. So now I'm going to go to my rhythm buttons and category F, user rhythms. I'm going to press user rhythms, and now there's the F10. Of course, it can end up anywhere when you push it. So I'm going to select F10. That's the rhythm we just stored. Now I'll restore that on 5, and I'm back to where I started. So the banks can be lost a little bit, but you do lose mixer settings. So if you've gone through and set up your main tone, your layer tone, your split tone, arpeggiation, all of those, that will be lost. So while we're on 5, let's see what the arpeggiator's got. And we're lucky it's still in the same place, because it's actually an identical version of 6, except for the F10 rhythm that we plugged in there. So I'm sure that's quite a long tutorial and quite a lot to take in. But the first part, selecting our tones, our layer, our arpeggiator, that we also selected the octave shift. So our upper 2 layer was brought down 2 octaves. All of that we've done before, so that's basically just review. So the new part was editing this style. And the way into the edit, so you want to make sure you're on the right registration number, not the original one here, 66. See, that's synth pop 2 A003. That A is telling you that's a factory preset. When I switched to bank 16 registration 5, now it's saying F. F is a user rhythm 010. Synth pop 2's got the same name. You do have the option of changing that name, but I'm not doing that because this way I know which rhythm I edited, and it's a little easier to re-edit something that way. So when we went to 2, we went then we went to pattern sequencer. We pressed the pattern sequencer button once, so we got pattern sequencer part. Then we pressed the mixer button once, and that's how we started editing this rhythm track. You can see 10 is drums. I'm using my navigation arrows down to start into the mixer functions. Now I'm going to turn the drums back on to remind us what we did. And the navigation arrows and the little triangle under the channel numbers, that's important because you can only edit one channel at a time. You can't edit everything at the same time. And the other part that we did is we started the rhythm, and then you pick. There's an intro to end it, or you pick normal, or you can hit normal again, and now it's the normal fill in. So let's say we left that drum in there. Let's take that drum out of the normal fill in right now. Go to part and turn that off, and now the drum's out. Now 11's got that little sound. Let's see if we can find that sound. There it is. It's that little siren decreasing sound. So I'm going to change my mixer to volume, and I'm going to turn that thing up. So now I've actually edited the edited version. So what happens now? So when I exit, I'm going to push my exit button once, and I'm going to push the exit button a second time, and now it's asking me to store because I changed a few things in addition to what I changed before. So we're still in the edited version in our user rhythms, but because we changed it, I have to restore it again as a user rhythm. This isn't banks and registration, this is user rhythm. So yes, I want to store that, and by default 001, as I said. But we want that on 010. I press my enter button, and now it says replace, and I say yes. 010 is where I want it. And now we're complete. And that is one of the simpler ways to change rhythm. You can work with this for probably the next year before we get into actually creating rhythms from scratch. So go back and listen to the performance at the beginning and watch the buttons I'm pushing, and you'll get an idea of what's going on and how you can really use this keyboard to its fantastic full power.